Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Carnivore Roundtable. Today we have a really different format, something really exciting that I don't think any of us have ever seen done before. We have a whole family with us, a whole family of carnivores, and we're going to talk about and go through their story of healing on a structured carnivore diet. So buckle in. It's going to be an informative ride, and enjoy the show. To get started, let's all introduce ourselves. My name is caitmizzi. I'm a functional nutritionist just outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
And we are the Meters, and we've been eating an animal-based diet for just a little bit over a year and a half.
Yeah, my name is Vajid. I am a Canadian-trained MD, and radiology is my specialty. Big passion for prevention of disease through nutrition. And on that note, I mean, just as a bit of a medical disclaimer, so whatever you're hearing from this podcast, again, it's not medical advice. That has to be individualized. So if you're going to try anything suggested in this video that we talk about, make sure you consult your clinician, whether it's an MD or somebody else, just to be safe, basically.
All right.
Should we introduce ourselves also?
Yes, please, Helma. We would love for you to lead the ship here and introduce your family and a little bit about each one of you.
Okay. Shall we start with the kids or the adults? Any preference?
You go for it. However you like.
Okay. My name's Helma. I'm the mother of these three troglodytes. We fixed many of our health problems by eliminating seemingly endless foods, and we've ended up essentially healing with the strategically carnivorous diet, which is Paleolithic Ketogenic in nature.
And I am Michael. I'm the father of these guys here. And I'm also a participant in the PKD carnivore diet.
Go ahead, Isabella.
Okay, I'm Isabella, and when we started this diet, within just a few weeks, it helped me feel a lot better, and I was off my medication for arthritis.
That's great.
I'm Adriano. I'm their kid, and I got dragged into the whole diet thing as well, that whatever we decided to do as a family, and also noticed some improvement.
My name is Massimo. I'm a full-time student living away from home throughout the majority of the year while also doing a full-time carnivore diet.
Great. What are you studying?
Software engineering.
Perfect. There's a lot of great engineers of all sorts of different kinds sort of leading up the nutrition world right now. So that's good. Critical thinking. All right. So we really want to kind of understand and explain to our audience a little bit more about what PKD is. And because it's not just as simple as a ketogenic diet, and it's also not just as simple as a 100% carnivorous diet either. There's an actual sort of structure and science to it. So Vajid, maybe if you could sort of take us through what that looks like exactly.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I guess this might be new to a lot of people who are just sort of doing the carnivore diet, which people really simplify to eating, meat, no plants, eat when you're hungry, that kind of thing. But this is a bit more to it. And the way I introduce it to people, you can think of it as a structured, clinically validated carnivore diet, version of a carnivore diet, probably the most validated of all the different types of carnivore that are out there. So it was created by this group in Hungary. It's a clinical group in Hungary. They're called the International Center for Medical and Nutritional Intervention, or ICMNI. They used to be called Paleomedicina, but they feel that, the new name is more neutral. It doesn't, some people may have some biases towards the whole paleo thing. So they are going with that new name now. The main researchers, I think it was all started by Dr. Csaba Tóth, maybe pronouncing the name incorrectly. It's Hungarian. He's an internist, and he does internal medicine there. And the other main partner in this is Dr. Zofia Clemens, who's a neurobiologist and clinical researcher. She specializes in nutrition, nutritional therapy, and brain research. So I believe the way this all started was in about 2011. Dr. Tóth started to treat his patients, with trial and error, but starting with the paleo diet. He believed that, diet can help reverse disease, and a bad diet can cause a lot of sort of the chronic Western diseases of civilization that people are dealing with these days. And eventually he came up with what's called the Paleolithic Ketogenic Diet, which was a more refined version of that. And the way he did this was using, and with Dr. Clemens, clinical feedback. So they look at something called intestinal permeability, which I'll explain in a second, and they get clinical feedback using something called a PEG 400 test. Lab markers, imaging, and then patient symptoms, like how they're actually doing. Like, do they feel like their disease is getting better other than the objective sort of markers they look at? So they propose sort of a threefold mechanism for chronic diseases of civilization. So 3 factors. So number 1 being intestinal permeability, which you may have heard being called leaky gut, more colloquially. Excess carbohydrate beyond what our bodies are typically capable of handling on a regular basis, and then food additives and chemicals. So intestinal permeability, I guess the way to explain that is your GI tract is a barrier between the external environment and your internal environment. So technically speaking, your GI tract from your mouth to the end is the external environment, because it's connected, there's bacteria and stuff like that. And then your intestines are a barrier between that, your bloodstream, and the rest of your body that is supplied by that bloodstream. So you've got these cells lining your gut that are held tightly together by something called tight junctions. I think it's a kind of a protein or a molecule. And when you have leaky gut, I guess these molecules get disrupted, and it allows things to go through your gut lining that shouldn't be allowed to go through. Like, usually it should just be like simple sugars, amino acids, maybe dipeptides, tripeptides, but nothing really bigger, fat molecules too. But basically what happens is you get certain bigger proteins that get exposed to your immune system, and it can cause like an autoimmune complex, a reaction to happen. So that's bad. So they test that with that PEG 400 test. So PEG 400, that's polyethylene glycol. Basically, it's a solution with molecules of varying sizes, from very tiny to larger. You drink it, and then you produce a urine sample later on. So your urine comes from filtering your blood. So they look at that urine sample, and they look at how big the molecules of polyethylene glycol are in the urine, and that tells them how permeable the person's gut is, how leaky their gut is. So if there's just a few small molecules, not too leaky. If there's a lot of bigger molecules, then it probably means that it's more leaky. So that's the intestinal permeability side, and then there's the excess carbohydrate, and then the food additives that I mentioned. So they feel that the elements of the diet that they tell their patients to do help to prevent or reverse these problems, the 3 things I talked about. So there's the paleo element, which allows sort of leaky gut to heal, because we're eating sort of a diet we're more evolutionarily adapted to, and none of the stuff we shouldn't be eating. Then there's ketosis, so that's the low carb part, decreasing your carbohydrate load. It gives you stable energy. It has anti-inflammatory properties. And then the last bit is exclusion of foods with sort of additives or chemicals, and specifically some really harmful foods like industrial seed oils that they really specifically say do not consume these. And there's no supplements on this diet either. So diseases they've treated with this include IBD, so inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, autoimmune arthritis, mental health disorders, sleep apnea, and even some cancers as serious as something called glioblastoma multiforme, or GBM, which is literally one of the worst cancers you can get. You typically don't survive longer than like 4 to 6 months, but they've had, I think, one published case where they said that the patient, just through diet, held his GBM completely free of advancement. It didn't progress for like 2 years, which is pretty much unheard of. And there's a whole slew of other diseases. I'm not going to list them all, but you can go to their website. There's tons of stuff that they have used, that they've treated with this diet. So the way to do the diet, it's basically meat, fat, and organs only if you're particularly unwell. If you're relatively healthy, they do allow a 30% allowance for some vegetables and fruit. Mainly they say stick to root vegetables like carrots, 1 piece of fruit a day, no jams, no sugary things, no soft drinks. And they emphasize a 2-to-1 fat to protein ratio to keep you in ketosis. It's actually a fairly low protein diet compared to what maybe a lot of bodybuilders consume. It's maybe, for a guy my size, 50 to 60 grams of protein a day, and I'm of average size. And then visibly, the way they say to estimate that is to look at your food, and if it's 1/3 visible fat, it's fine. If it's leaner than that, then you need to add enough to make it 1/3 visible fat. So they have some published documents about that stuff, but that's basically how to do it and what it's for. So I guess I'll stop there. I think that's probably enough information. And if people have anything to add, they can feel free to add to that.
That's a very good description, Bajid, of the diet.
Excellent.
Very good summary.
Yeah. It's essentially what we've done. We did this, we started, I think, February of 2019.
Actually, we started on January.
We started in January.
Mid-January.
Mid-January, we had our session with Sophia. But I think February 1st is when I had them both
Off medication.
In ketosis, and both of them off medication within 2 weeks, I believe, simultaneously, right? They were both diagnosed with quite different things, but the diet worked for both of them simultaneously within weeks.
So let's talk a little bit about what each one of the kids were diagnosed with, what the official diagnoses were and when, and then whether or not those conditions have been put into remission through the diet.
Okay. So, Ariana, well, I think the key element that ties all of this together, I think, is the fact that all three kids ultimately were diagnosed with celiac disease, which, unless you know you have it, is kind of like the canaries in the coal mine with the food of today. So I think that's like a precursor to getting any and all autoimmune diseases, because unless you know you have that and actually eat accordingly, you're essentially damaging your gut daily. And we had no idea. I didn't know what that was. And Adriano stopped growing, I think it was 2013. And the doctor, Muscle had stopped growing many times, but back then he tested his hand with x-rays to see if they had already fully connected all the bones. He never suggested doing the celiac test. Then when Adriano stopped growing, he said at some point, let's do this blood test and let's see if he has it. And he was diagnosed on the spot just on blood work. And that was, I think, right before Thanksgiving 2013. And then she, within months, was also diagnosed with celiac, but first, prior to that, with juvenile arthritis, because she stopped walking. She was in extreme pain. And I think there was so much going on in her blood work, they weren't sure what all was the issue. So they thought there might be lupus, arthritis, as well as celiac. So they eliminated lupus, confirmed juvenile arthritis, oligo juvenile arthritis, and then celiac within a few months of that. And then Massimo, we got diagnosed. We did his blood work, I think, 3 or 4 times with the pediatrician, because the IG specialist at Sick Kids said the chances of him having it with 2 siblings is really high. And she suggested I get the pediatrician to formally send Massimo to Sick Kids as well, but not by pressuring him. So we did the blood work, I think, 3 times. He would only do it every 6 months, and it kept being negative. But I knew deep inside that he had it too. So I kind of had to outmaneuver the pediatrician. So I sent for a gene test. Toronto had a gene lab that would do just celiac disease. And we did the gene test. So I went back to the doctor and I said, listen, just so you know, Massimo does have the gene for celiac disease. And he said, okay, we'll send him to Sick Kids. And he was scoped right before your 18th birthday.
Yeah, biopsy.
They did a biopsy, and he had not even woken up from the anesthesia. The doctor came right into the room and said he had visible damage to the naked eye in 7 areas that they scoped.
Wow.
Of his intestine. They didn't even need to send it to a lab. The diagnosis was on the spot. And I was very grateful, because had this not happened, he would have probably kept going the way he was. And also he wouldn't have had a good experience, because at Sick Kids, they give you better treatment as a young person, I think, medically, than if you are going for these procedures as an adult. So that was my goal, to have him diagnosed before 18. So, but literally within weeks of him turning 18, we got that figured out.
And Helma and Michael, do either of you have celiac disease in your family lineage that you know of?
None that we know of. And then after Massimo's gene test, we both did it as well, just to see, and we both had the disease, the gene. So we both pass it on to all of them.
Yeah.
But as far as we know, in our families, there's no presence of this disease.
Okay. Yeah.
But
It was very difficult to detect. I sympathize with many families that don't know what's wrong with their kids or themselves, for that matter. I think the celiac is probably like a gateway of finding out what could be wrong for many chronic diseases.
Yeah, it's failure to thrive, not growing. I mean, there's so many things that can cause that. So yeah, you're right. I would say, like, in a way, it's a blessing to have something so definitive like celiac diagnosed, because it's a clear diagnosis, where some of these other things, like even on my CT scans, I know what to look for in patients that have celiac or other diseases of malabsorption. But I get patients, I don't know what the numbers are, but probably in the realm of 25% of the CTs of the abdomen that I look at, you can see subtle signs of intestinal malabsorption. And these people are like grown-ups, they're walking around, doesn't say anything about them having celiac on the requisition. So I assume they're not diagnosed with anything and they're just walking around with this. So it's pretty prevalent, I would say, more than people think. And people just never know until they get a clear diagnosis like this, I think.
The IG specialist told me that in Vancouver, they were finding that none of the standard symptoms were applying to anyone diagnosed with celiac anymore. Young kids were being diagnosed without having any diarrhea, any bloating. They were all being diagnosed in a new trend for failure to thrive. So mentally, physically not doing well, but nothing related to the gut specifically. So it was much more difficult. And then once I remember, I think Boston University, when I was first starting my research, Boston University linked that all the kids that were diagnosed with arthritis, a good 25% of them had celiac. So it's a clear gateway to, I think, probably every single autoimmune disease there is. Your body's attacking itself.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what autoimmune means.
Yeah. Yeah. And as soon as you have sort of established one autoimmune disease, it really opens the floodgates for secondary and tertiary conditions to become rooted and to sort of activate. So I would say celiac disease too is probably one of the most problematic in that chain of autoimmune conditions as well, because just as you sort of were saying with the children, failure to thrive, you can't absorb all of the nutrients in the same way that you normally would due to the inflammation and injury in the intestinal lining. So by having a compromised immune system due to poor nutritional status, you're left very vulnerable then for so many other conditions to start, whether they're autoimmune related or not. So I would definitely agree that that is probably the worst offender of all of them.
Yeah. It's like a domino effect. If you have that one, it's just a matter of time before the first like autoimmune disease, like one after the other.
Yeah.
And we didn't do fast food. We didn't, the kids, we ate at home. Afterwards, I thought I'd have to create like a gluten-free section. It turned out that most of what we had was gluten-free. And each subsequent checkup at Sick Kids, they would get an annual checkup with the IG department and they would do all the blood work. And every year, his blood, especially Adriano's, it wouldn't go back to normal. So then I would say to the IG specialist, I would say, how is that possible? We don't know. It takes time. But I think it took 4 years. And it wasn't really until we fully implemented PKD that we saw the drastic difference. Up until then, it was just microscopic. And It was like climbing sand, doing like 3 steps up, 5 down. It was never fully resolved until we embraced.
Yeah, I'm curious if you were continuing to consume a lot of cross-reactive foods at that time, like when the diagnosis was early on and you removed gluten and maybe even other grains. But, you know, we do know that there's plenty of cross-reactive foods that are quite molecularly similar, and so that they can be flagged in the same way as gluten in the body. So things like corn, soy, dairy, and other random offenders. Were those still in the diet at the time?
We eliminated corn, we eliminated dairy, but it was all staggered.
It was later.
Okay.
So actually, the first thing you do when you find out that you have celiac, you of course eliminate all the wheat and you start going on this gluten-free trend. and every substitute for what has gluten in it either has corn or rice.
Exactly.
And those are mostly actually more refined in many cases and more processed. And so we did not see improvements by just switching over to gluten-free foods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty common story to hear in clinical practice as well, with other adults or children that have been recently diagnosed as celiac. They get right on that gluten-free bandwagon and have zero or very little improvement, because really the foods are still just as problematic.
I have to say that the majority of the gluten-free foods, and so when you are celiac and you look for the gluten-free foods, the majority of gluten-free foods that you find are actually snacks.
Yeah.
And so you tend to, oh, look, gluten-free cookies or gluten-free cake or gluten-free muffin or gluten-free whatever. And so you end up buying those things thinking that they're good for you. And
they're still nutritionally void foods. So you're not
even more so
recovering at all. Yeah.
But even if you buy quinoa, which technically is gluten-free, a lot of these things still have gluten. It's just there's smaller amounts. Yeah. And
or
that is not
contaminated through manufacturing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're really sensitive, that just a transfer of one grain-free item to another bag or container that at one point had some gluten molecules in it could be enough cross-contamination to cause an entire flare in some cases. Yeah.
And we never did low fat. We always did full fat. We always had butter. I bought the top oils. I bought the best rice. I bought the best. We never skimped on caliber.
Everything organic.
Everything organic, non-GMO. Always top to bottom, best food, made no difference. Also because today's vegetables are nutritionally bereft, right? At the end of the day, you're still not getting anything. That's the problem.
Well, I think one thing that's good news, I think, is that some of these diseases that seem unrelated, there's clinical, there's established associations between them. And I don't want to scare you guys about this one because you guys have your celiac under control. You know you've got it. But there's an association between celiac and lymphoma. And then, for instance, inflammatory bowel disease. If I have an imaging study that's an MRI, CT that shows signs of inflammatory bowel disease, the next thing we look at is the SI joints, because there's a association between SI joint inflammation and inflammatory bowel disease. And I think it's just a matter of time. It might take a bit longer because we need to do research, but people will start to connect the dots between diet, inflammatory bowel disease, these arthritides that people are experiencing, and then they'll be like, oh, eureka, we understand now that this is the key factor that's causing all this stuff. It's what we're eating.
So Vajid, what did you say, SI joint?
Sorry, sacroiliac joint. So they're kind of in your hips and your pelvis. Yeah. It's one of the most common joints that gets inflamed with inflammatory bowel disease.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, what did you say, Vajid?
Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. I was just saying what IBD actually is. Those two diseases.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say, and I mean, I'm sure you probably all can relate knowing people in your own lives, but SI problems are rampant. Everybody complains of having SI issues at some point or another or throughout their whole lives. It's an excruciating issue to have. And you have to wonder sometimes about whether even just something as sort of benign sounding as SI pain or whatever is also related just simply to diet prior to the onset of a disease state. Very common ailment to have. So
I literally just now heard of that for the first time, so I'll be researching that after.
Yeah, not celiac though. So I don't want you to think that it's just for the other stuff, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis.
Yeah, no, I know quite a few people that have that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah, very common, unfortunately. So I have some questions that I'm really curious about asking kids specifically, because obviously our world is really, it is not set up to support this kind of eating, this way of life on the best of days for an adult who can spend their whole life researching and coming to this conclusion on their own. But for 3 kids, you know, who obviously have friends that probably don't eat the same way, you're exposed to all kinds of different diets and lifestyles through your peers. Do you feel that despite your family doing it together, that it's the right thing? Like, do you personally believe that it's a good choice for you individually to eat this way? Yeah, that's amazing to hear. That makes me super happy to hear.
Behind my back, they did research on their own. They did due diligence. Yeah, they did due diligence. Great. They looked it up themselves and confirmed it.
Well, like we were able to confirm it by just the way we felt after we switched over, right? Like we feel so much better afterwards. I mean, there has to be a reason as to why, and why would we go back? Right? Of
course. Do you ever get any kickback from your peers? Does anyone ever poke fun at you, or you know, just come down on you, say you're boring, that you should eat a cupcake or whatever it is? Like, do you get much kickback from your peers?
No. I think it's the opposite. I think we're not boring at all, because I mean, so when I meet new people, I tell them like, hey, like I only eat meat and a lot of fat, and a few of them look at me a little weird.
Yeah, how's your dating, Massimo?
Yeah, that's a good question. Can't exactly just go out to a regular restaurant and be like, oh, let's go out for dinner, right? I have to go to something like a steakhouse or something like that. But I mean, all my friends, they understand. I mean, they've known me for a long time, and they know that we've been through a lot as a family, and they see the results that has come out of this diet and the way that we eat and the way that we feel, and they also think it's the best for us. And even though, like, I have some friends that are vegan, and even though I don't agree that that is the best for you, but if it's working for you, it's working for you, right? Yep. But I know I've never received any crazy kickback from it.
We've even had a few of his friends over because they wanted a crash course on how to get started.
Yeah, a few of them.
Wow. Oh, cool.
And it's growing. There's more of them.
Yeah.
One is
Isabella, you're a little bit younger. So what about you? When you go to friends' houses, do parents of your friends ever kind of raise an eyebrow and wonder why you eat the way you do?
The thing is, I've never really been to a friend's house other than one of my friends, and the thing is, they never questioned my diet, and they actually seemed into it. Mm-hmm. Even though I rarely see them have meat. It's because, well, my friend is actually can't have pork because of religion.
Okay.
Yeah. The father is an anesthesiologist, but he's Lebanese.
Okay.
So he does all the cooking. So they eat organs. None of what we do raises his eyebrows. He was taught as a doctor that celiac is the zebra. It looks like a horse, but it's not. So that's how he kind of correlates our diet. It makes sense to him because of what we're dealing with.
That's great.
Going back to the celiac thing, it was always difficult and in some cases somewhat dangerous for the kids to frequent other people's homes. And it's always been a challenge. It's always been a challenge, even since they were small. It's not a normal life, if you will. But that's even going back to when we were first made aware of the celiac.
Yeah.
Well, for me, part of the reason why I never went to other people's houses in the first place is because of how I mentally felt from what we were eating already. Like, I was pretty socially anxious, and I found a lot of trouble just wanting to, like, ask people, like, to go over to their place or something, or even just going to meet new people or something like that. I don't have as much of an issue with that now, but I still am a bit of a
introvert.
Yeah, but that's mostly out of habit because I spent so many years just, obviously when you develop a certain mindset to cope with the mental issues that you have, it's hard to, this diet helps get rid of the issue itself, but it doesn't really get rid of the habits that you developed over that time, immediately. So yeah, I never really had an issue with going to other people's places or having to go out much at all.
One of his friend's mothers, actually, for her, when he went to her son's birthday, she went online and looked up the recipe for a homemade gluten-free cake. So when he went to his friend's birthday party, the mother had made a gluten-free cake for her son because of him.
Yeah.
Aw,
So
that's great.
people are amazing, actually. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, a few of those things happened to me is that I still have friends that kind of haven't caught on that I only eat meat and fat. So whenever they go to the store or going out, they'll be like, oh, we got you gluten-free brownies or something like that. I'm like, I'm sorry. I really appreciate it, but I
still won't eat them. Yeah.
So funny.
I have a 9-year-old, and although he's not strict carnivore PKD, I mean, we, definitely don't eat any of the sort of standard offenders. Like, there's never been food coloring. Sugar is, it sneaks in sometimes in other people's homes, but grain-free and definitely gluten-free for sure, right across the boards. Other strange things too. Like, he knows how to read an ingredients package. So as soon as he sees something on there that isn't an actual food, he, simply just politely declines. But we have experienced kickback for sure on that. He's certainly been made fun of a few times, and it's never by the children. It's by the adults.
Wow.
So I'm happy to hear that none of you guys have really had that experience, because I think that fear of coming up against some of that judgment really does keep a lot of people from doing what they know is best. They don't want to feel isolated or cast out or judged, which is so unfortunate, because I mean, the quality of life is...
People end up conforming.
Yeah.
Well, food is such a social aspect of our lives. And so if you don't participate in the same type of food that other people are eating, of course, you're almost not participating in their lifestyle, and it's looked upon as, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And so it's huge. It is huge.
Yeah.
It's great that you guys, though, as kids, have the confidence to decline politely and say no, because that's not easy, right? A lot of people feel peer pressure and they'll just eat the food. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I assume it's because you guys know what it'll do to you, how bad you'll feel, and probably compared to how you used to feel, you probably feel great now, right? So it's motivation to like decline, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also over time, like ever since we started eating gluten-free, right, for the past 4 or 5 years, saying no is, normal.
Practice,
right?
yeah, you got practice, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, for those who have a newfound, or are trying to change diet, or have a newfound, diagnosis where they can't eat a certain thing, it'll take some practice to be like, I can't just eat whatever I want. I can't eat whatever is just offered to me, right? But over time, we'll be like, no, I'm sorry, I really appreciate it, but I can't.
And just on that note too, like I have a question for you, because I'm actually kind of trying to do PKD. I'm struggling with the going lower on protein. I'm struggling a bit with the ratios, but I'm kind of halfway there. And one thing I've experienced is that the temptation is no longer there. Like, I'll look at a piece of cheesecake, or like yesterday pecan pie, and I'm like almost revolted. Like my stomach turns, which never used to happen. I used to just cave and eat 3 pieces and enjoy it. Do you guys find that's the case? Like, you don't even have the temptation to eat these foods anymore?
Yeah. As long as you don't commit to not having it for long enough, I think, yes, you do completely get rid of the temptation.
Especially the sugar.
Yeah. I find, sorry.
The sugar becomes synonymous with poison.
Yeah.
So like nothing with sugar really interests me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love to have a nice fresh mozzarella, or peanuts or something like that, which I can't have, but at least not on the PKD regimen.
Yeah.
But not the sugars. The sugars are, I think, totally behind us.
What about honey?
Oh, sorry.
No, honey, yes.
Honey, yeah.
Raw honey.
Raw honey.
Yeah, honey's allowed. I think they said, 2 teaspoons a day is the limit. But honey's okay, apparently.
So it's 2 teaspoons. Okay.
What's that?
5 grams. 5 grams.
Okay. That's
Adriana, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say specifically with sugar, I think the other biggest thing is that it just doesn't taste the same. anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Once you stop having it as much. Like I remember on vacation, we used to always go to places where they had like slushies or ice creams and things like that. And I think the last time that we went to that same place, we got a slushie or a granita, what they called it in Italy. And we tried it just as a once in a long time thing, just to, you know, let go for a bit. And we just didn't enjoy it that much because it was too much. There was too much sugar, and it just
it was too sweet.
Even by the it's not even that sweet at all, right? It's mostly like, it's like lemonade. It's like iced lemonade, right?
Italian style. So Italians already don't do the same level of sweetness like North America. So imagine that was too much for us, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that because, you know, occasionally you are at a friend's house or somebody else makes something and you think it's going to be okay. Like, oh, it's just ribs or something. And you have a bite and there's sauce on it. And if there's sugar in that sauce, it's like a shot to the head. You're like, especially if you haven't had it in a really long time, it feels 10 times sweeter than it ever would have tasted in your past life. You really do totally change the palate once you've removed it for a long time. Yeah.
That's why everything that you order at a restaurant is a potential landmine when you're on this diet, because you don't know what's going to come to you and how it was prepared and what it was marinated in, and so it's very difficult. I mean, there's people using Coca-Cola in their slow cookers for their ribs because the acidity breaks down the meat, and that is a normal recipe for someone.
You're in a soup.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very good at reading labels and finding the landmines in the ingredients.
Well, the thing is, a lot of at restaurants is that they don't tell you exactly what you're getting. Like I remember recently, I ordered a steak at a place while we were out in
Quebec. Yeah,
Quebec, working. And I ordered a steak. That's pretty much all it said it was. It was a steak, and it said it came with some fries and some veggies, and we said no fries, please. And they added extra veggies, and it was just this tiny, pathetic steak, and it was just like 8 out of 10 portions of the plate was veggies and not the steak. Oh, so I ordered a steak, and most of what I got was not that. And it's like that at most restaurants. They just give you something that is just not even mentioned. And it's
not a language challenge because they all speak French. So it's not like they ordered one thing and got a total other thing. They were clear in what they asked for. Mm-hmm. And still, this is the given in a restaurant.
Or they don't know what's in their food. I think we went to Buffalo Wild Wings the other day, and I asked them if their burger was 100% beef, and he had to go check. But it is, though, and I'll try it next time. But a lot of the times I feel like people don't know exactly what oils are being used for the cooking, for the frying, or if the meat is 100% beef, it's marinated, what exactly it's marinated in.
Yeah. But people don't ask.
Yeah.
People are used to the commercial, which shows you, go to the diner, have the fried chicken, have the apple pie, and just have Tums.
Yeah.
That's how people think. Eat, and regret it with some Tums.
Yeah.
Treats.
Yeah.
We don't do that. So.
I think things are changing though, because now restaurants, at least the chain ones, are mandated to put calories on the menu. So hopefully, I know it's not completely accurate, but hopefully in the future we'll move to like the exact ingredients used in the preparation, like the oils, the marinades you guys were talking about. I mean, it's probably a long way off, but hopefully we're moving in that direction.
The irony is that calories are useless information.
Yeah,
more or less.
They mean nothing. But Isabella wants to mention one of her favorite recipes, which I think Petra and Daniel are also very familiar with.
So it's the keto pancakes.
Oh, God. They're so good.
Guys, we've been fasting, so easy on the triggering recipes.
Oh,
You
Okay?
start drooling.
She swooned. Go ahead.
Those
Yeah,
pancakes.
the thing about these pancakes is that they're only made of fat, duck eggs,
Yes.
and brains. And the thing is, when you taste them, they taste sweet, but they have no sugar in them.
This is true. This is
That's
true.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
on that note, I forgot to mention for the PKD, they stress organs, right? So like 400 grams of liver a week, and they also say brain is really important, right? So you guys try to eat.
We have brain and pancakes. They have it daily. They have liver every morning with their breakfast. And last night we grilled a huge pile of sweetbreads. Was that apparently the vitamin D, the vitamin C are key to get from those organs specifically. So those are the three. I essentially buy from our butcher all the brains every week and almost all the calf liver every week. And the sweetbreads every other week. So we get all of them.
We got to step our game up, honestly. I'm ashamed. You guys have liver every day, every morning. Wow.
It's amazing.
And I'm a brain noob. I'm actually putting in a request this week with my butcher to get some brain. I haven't had brain since I was a kid, but like on that note, you mentioned your Lebanese friend and how like he gets it with the liver, the organs and stuff. I remember back when I was a kid, so my family's from Pakistan and we went to visit there and I had brain. I had like goat brain when I was there. They eat that stuff, liver regularly. This is like, and I'm sure, you know, you guys maybe have some like European lineage. I'm sure back there, this is a more common food to eat there, right? Even in Hungary, they're saying it's very common. It's just in the West, our westernized diet.
Even in Italy, everything in the South when we're there, it's, they have all these specialties, like they take the lining of this, they've got the caul, I believe, and they wrap it around liver and extra fat. They grill it. They're called fegatini. They got bombette. Like you can go crazy in Southern Italy for the butcher and what they make. It's unbelievable.
And like Scotland, was it haggis or something? Is that the famous dish? It's the lining of something, the stomach, it's the stomach or the intestines or something, right? So
the Healthy Butcher makes one every year. You can order it. The problem is they fill it with oats.
Oh.
Yeah. So
That's
haggis is with oats because I was excited.
Okay.
But they ruin it.
That's a problem for sure.
Yeah.
This close.
Yeah. I was like, with them. Do you make a gluten-free version? No. I'm like, oh, come on. And it had all this great stuff in it. It's like lungs, liver, everything that you could possibly take a awful smorgasbord and they throw in oats. So
that's too bad,
yeah.
So I guess I'd like to know, guys, everyone, what was your initial reaction when you heard about this all meat diet or specifically PKD? How did you find out about PKD?
I think, well, I used to work at TVO. So whenever I folded laundry, I would be watching TVO and I happened to turn on the TV and Michaela Peterson was being interviewed with Jordan by Steve Bacon. So when she told me I have anxiety, I have depression, I get rid of it within a month just by eating meat and vegetables. I think the next day he was on meat and vegetables. He didn't know what happened. And it's once you go down that rabbit hole, I ended up finding PKD not too long after. I don't think it was through Michaela. It was kind of like you go through these different, like the dark web practically, right? Looking for these things. I don't know what I did, how I did it, when I did it. I just did it and I found PKD and I knew I had to get in touch with them, but I essentially started practicing. So I think it was like March 2015 when we went fully carnivore. I did it first because I knew there would be symptoms, diarrhea and all of that while the bacteria die off. So I thought Masco and I will go first so we can say to them a few weeks later, these symptoms are normal, whatever. And we ended up doing it almost immediately because they were both struggling. And I thought, what's the point of waiting? We know what we have to do. Let's just do it. And we just went carnivore and just eliminated everything else right away. And we knew that was essentially the key.
Yeah, we went from eating cereal for breakfast to liver. So.
It's sorry, go ahead.
So we practiced, essentially, we knew about PKD. We knew we were going to do it but we thought, let's practice first, because maybe if we do it on our own, we don't even need PKD. That summer, we ended up in Italy, and because we weren't actively trying to eat any pasta, cookies, pizza, cereal, we leaned on cheese. We leaned a lot. They would sell these bags with like these chunks of Parmigiano. So we leaned on cheese as a crutch. But then when we got home, it was as if we had to restart everything. It was like it undid the months of carnivore completely. So then that September, we went full carnivore again, or that August. By Christmas, I had an appointment with Sophia, and she further, fine-tuned what it is we had to tweak based on our blood work. And then within weeks, we were up and running. But yes, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, they say dairy is out. Like, I know a lot of people on carnivore still consume dairy, but they're very definitive. They're like, dairy is out. It's problematic. I think it's something with MS. They were saying it's implicated in MS plaques developing the autoimmune reaction through the leaky gut. You get these milk proteins in your bloodstream. So that was interesting. I think even for eggs, they say if you have leaky gut, probably best to stay away from eggs initially, but later on you can kind of add it back in because it doesn't worsen your leaky gut, but it's not exactly good for some reason if you've already got it.
Well, I think the first thing is that if you have a leaky gut and you're leaking egg into your system, I think your body recognizes that from all the vaccines, right? So it has like a hyper reaction. And I asked Sophia, I said, when we're done with this protocol, what can we reintroduce? And she said, never again grains, never again dairy, never again legumes, and never again nightshades. And she explained that dairy is fine until you're about 3 years old, full fat. After that, it makes things grow. It's designed for a calf to be up and running for predators within hours. It makes things grow. So if you're still ingesting it at a certain age, it can make things grow you don't want growing, like cancer, tumors. It's like a growth mechanism that you don't want or need.
And it's inflammatory.
Highly inflammatory, yeah.
So
that's the one thing we miss, I would say. I think if we could be carnivore with some dairy, that would be perfect. We would be perfectly content. That's the one thing I think.
In a perfect world.
Yeah.
So someone said we were carnivore first before actually doing PKD. And I have to say that the transition going from carnivore to PKD is not a difficult one, as long as you eliminate some of these other foods.
Yeah.
And does Sophia differentiate between different types of dairy, or does she say dairy right across the boards, like even a raw K2 dairy?
She had that discussion. I listened to 2 podcasts once driving to YU Ranch where I get my beef. I listened to Brian Sanders interviewing her for Food Lies on the way there, and on the way back I listened to Paul Saladino interviewing her. And she clarified it with Paul because he was saying, is there a difference between type A1, type A2 dairy? And she said, all dairy.
All dairy. I realized I said K2, not A2, so thanks.
Yeah, all dairy. She said all dairy is no good.
And for a while, we eliminated a lot of the fresh dairy and we used only aged, whether it was like cheddar or Parmigiano or something like that. But that made little difference.
Yeah, at the end of the day, no dairy has been the best thing for us.
Yeah. I was going to say
that was the true sacrifice. That was the true sacrifice. It wasn't grains, it wasn't legumes, it wasn't nightshade, like dairy. Because it's also, if you think about it, it's another one of those things that is addictive. If someone puts a platter of cheeses in front of you, I'll eat myself into a coma. 100%. There's certain things you can eat a lot of.
She's Dutch, that's why.
But I lived in Crete, and I grew, when I was a kid, I lived in Crete and I had access to raw goat cheeses all year round. That was my favorite thing. And it's highly addictive. And I think at the end of the day, anything that's highly addictive, like carbs, like dairy, are things that you should not have. Because they're addictive for a reason, not necessarily a good way.
So I have a question for you guys, but just to rewind first. So back to how you guys found PKD. Like I also noticed too, before I even talked to you guys about it, I saw people mentioning I'm on PKD whenever I was like looking around at carnivore forums, or you start to see it pop up and you can start to look into it. And for our viewers, I mean, You know, there is a description of it on their website. You can pay 30 euros to support their research and you get like the full description of it. But a lot of the information is freely available. So like you guys, like I haven't done a consultation yet, but I know how to do the diet. You might as well try it first before you go and do a consultation with them.
That's right.
But yeah, so if people are looking for that, I mean, we'll have some info. Hopefully I'll make a slide for this podcast a bit earlier on so people can see how to do it. But I guess on the note of the consultation, I'm just curious, like, what was that experience like? Like, what were they like? How was the intake? Like, you know, they must have done some kind of interview, asked you guys for information, lab tests. Like, how did you find the whole consultation process with them?
They're incredible. They are truly incredible. They're professional. They're organized. They're on point. You get your consultation with them. Sophia speaks beautiful English. She communicates things to you as a layman in a very understandable way. Things are very clear. We've always videotaped or taped whatever we've done with her just to go back because she's such an incredibly bright and succinct person. So what she tells you is invaluable. It's truly a formula to peak health that you don't get from any typical Western medical practitioner. You just don't.
Yeah.
What they've accomplished is unparalleled, really, I think worldwide.
I noticed that in all her interviews, I mean, there aren't too many of Sabatoth, but there's plenty of interviews online and she's very definitive. Like there's no waffling. Like you ask her questions, she's like, no, this doesn't work. And like, they know it because of the trial and error. Like they've tried all this stuff in their patients and they're like, oh, your leaky gut's getting worse. Your symptoms are getting worse. They document. I like that. They're very like objective and they've figured it out. They've really hashed it out.
Figured it out.
Yeah.
I think also we've never spoken with Dr. Sabatoth, but he was the one that was sick to begin with. I believe he had 3 or 4 autoimmune diseases. I believe one of them may have been colitis or IBS. I'm not sure now. I don't recall. He had high blood pressure, and I think he may have had eczema as well. I don't recall for sure all that he had. He's the one that went paleo, resolved most of it, and then thought, well, how is it that I've come this far and resolved so much, yet not 100%. So he's the one that dug further and then became the discoverer of the actual protocol, because it's scientific. Mm-hmm. It's truly a medical solution because it's measured. It's proven.
Which is so great because like I think when a lot of my medical colleagues heard that I was doing carnivore at the beginning, they're like, oh, it's a fad. It's like an immediate knee-jerk reaction to anything. I find that a lot of the time they're not very open-minded to things that are actually working. But the great thing about PKD is it's carnivore, but it's like validated, it's working, it's documented. They're trying to publish their results. So in terms of getting sort of the modern medical community to open their mind, this is the way to do it. You've got to put that wedge in the door and start widening it using data, right? That's what they're driven by,
data.
Right?
It's totally data driven. And when we went to Italy, I think not last year, last year, our very close friends that we vacation with, Michele's childhood friend Tullio and his wife, they also have 3 kids. The wife, Hosanna, is a pediatrician. And I think early last year, she said to me, I'm sending you one of my clients. They're not able to get her to get better. So it was her client had a daughter who I think was 6. Her name was Violetta. She had what they thought was juvenile arthritis, and all the medications that she was on was destroying her liver. So Hosanna sent the mother to me, explain to her what it is you're doing, because they had to take her off all the medication because it was going to cost her liver. So they switched to PKD. They followed us. Within 3 weeks, the little girl had normal liver bodies and normal liver count for the first time in 3 years. So when we got to Italy afterwards, we were on the beach with Hosanna, the pediatrician. She said, I pulled out all my medical books. She said, what the hell was I taught? How is it that with this diet, this little girl's liver was normal within 3 weeks? And she said, I cannot discuss this with my colleagues.
It's
she
difficult.
was flabbergasted.
For sure. It's very challenging. Like I get attacked. I actually get called unethical indirectly when I suggest this kind of thing to people, and they just dismiss it. They're like, oh, there's no evidence to show this. The preponderance of the evidence shows that a plant-based diet is healthy. And I'm just like, man, like, leave that aside. Just open your mind. There's people getting better from like diseases we were taught about in medical. So they're actually getting better without medication. Like we should be looking at this. There's something here. So I get where she's coming from for sure.
She had great difficulty. She literally brought out all her books, went through everything. And that's all we talked about when we met up with them on the beach. She was just in complete shock. So it turned out the girl did not have arthritis. And the other issue in Italy is that you, as the doctors, can decide what needs to be given to the child for medication. And they were next going to give her anti-rejection medication for whatever reasons they thought best. But at the end of the day, the mother knew that the root of the solution would be the diet, and they never, ever varied again after that. And Italy is very heavy, pasta, pizza, merenda. The mother knew. The mother and the child completely switched over to PKD, 100%.
That's great.
Yeah. So
that's not an isolated incident.
No. There's a carnivore group growing in Italy now. There's quite a few.
And here too, by the way.
No, here too.
Oh yeah, I put last weekend, I just put a note on Facebook and I said, hey, like I post a lot about carnivore. If anybody here is interested in joining like a WhatsApp group chat where we talk about this stuff, if you've got health problems, and like I didn't add anybody into it other than the initial guy, one of my friends, and 30 people joined. And like random people I never knew were curious about this stuff, and they're asking so many questions. They want to try it for all sorts of different reasons. So it's good. The interest is there. I think people are just a little bit shy sometimes to talk about it openly.
So Vajid, this is a private Facebook group that you started?
No, it's a WhatsApp group chat.
Oh, nice.
If you guys want to join it, I'll add you. You just give me your number and I'll add you guys to it. Sure.
Absolutely.
So we do want to make the distinction between carnivore and PKD. So the PKD is a very structured diet, and most of the time it's tailored to you as an individual. And that's where the consultation with Sophia and or ICMNI will basically dictate what you should be doing for optimum health. And it's based on your blood work, based on how much food you should be eating, and what objectives you're trying to reach in terms of your personal health. So I just want to make that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and I've been very clear to them that like, hey, there's all these different ways of doing carnivore. I'm doing PKD, and I've explained that to them. So I think they would get that, and I'm obviously there to explain. Anyways, we won't go on a tangent about my WhatsApp group chat. We get back to the conversation.
And to answer your question, Rashid, the initial consultation with Sophia is incredible. But even her assistant, their assistant, Natalie, she was in Barcelona. She's now in Budapest, but she is fully fluent in Spanish, English, and Italian. I think she's half Italian. One of her parents is Italian. So when you do the secondary consultations and follow-up are with Natalie, and even those she also had arthritis. She also had autoimmune disease that she completely cured doing PKD. So she knows exactly what you need to do. Amazing.
Yeah, she has a great Instagram account too. I think it's fairly popular.
Yes.
So carnivore is a good first step, but what's important to understand is those three fundamentals that you illustrated earlier. One of the pillars is really the ketosis. Mm-hmm. And you can do carnivore and essentially switch to 100% carnivore and not necessarily enter into ketosis. And the reason being is that if you eat too much protein that your body cannot absorb, like you mentioned, for an average man, it's roughly about 60 grams a day. The excess protein gets turned into glucose. And so you're not running your body in ketosis. Essentially, when you're running your body in ketosis, you're using the fat as a fuel source. Whereas if you don't have the fat, you're using the glucose as your food source, as your fuel source to motor your body. So it's either fuel from glucose or fuel from fat. And if you're getting fuel from fat, you're in ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think, weren't they saying that if you eat excess protein, it gets converted into glucose? Was that the reason why you're not in ketosis?
That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I can attest to that because these days I'm eating, like I was saying, I'm kind of halfway between carnivore and PKD, struggling to get the protein down. So on a typical day, I eat 80 to 130 grams of protein, and my keto sticks are almost never positive when I check. I mean, I know that's not completely accurate, but I don't think I'm personally in ketosis every day. So I get
the key is the fat.
Yeah.
And so in order to get that consistent ketosis, you have to go to that 30% protein, 30% fat to protein, 100 grams of protein to 30 grams of fat, or 2-to-1 ratio.
The weighing helps. If you're starting, weighing it helps, I think.
Yeah.
Just to narrow it down.
So on that note, do you all have different macros that you're currently following, or have you gotten to a place where you can be a little bit more loose about how much fat to protein you're all having, or is there a specific threshold for each one of you right now?
I think we're all following different patterns. I think Massimo has narrowed it down to 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I eat around 300 to 350 grams of food a day, depending on what I'm doing, because like the majority of the time I have a very sedentary lifestyle. So if I know I'm going to work on my computer all day, right, I'm not going to eat that much food, and I'm not going to feel hungry. I'm not going to feel bloated or anything like that. So I usually eat around 300 to 350 grams of food. That's including protein and fat for dinner. But if I know I'm going to have a very heavy, like physically intensive day, I would have breakfast at times, so maybe like bacon, eggs, and some fat as well to keep me going throughout the day. But otherwise, since I'm home on the computer the majority of the time, I only eat 300 grams of food.
Yeah, and on that note, I think they say to eat only when you're hungry, drink only when you're thirsty. And I mean, I know for me, I get super hungry on the days I work out. The other days, I'm also not too hungry. I could do 1 meal a day or eat later in the day, kind of like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And Massimo's palate, unfortunately, we caught him too late, so he doesn't quite develop a taste for liver. No. So he takes supplements to help him out.
Yeah, essentially it's desiccated dried liver in a pill, pretty much. I do take that every day. I take like 6 pills every day, pretty much. So.
Adriano does 2 meals a day. Mm-hmm. So usually for breakfast, he has a ribeye with some liver, and we pour extra fat on top. And Isabella has tenderloin with liver as well. And she always likes bacon on the side. So they do 2 meals a day. And Mikit and I do 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
And pretty much the same. I do bacon, eggs, meat. I've been doing a lot of meat lately just because I feel like I need to eliminate eggs for a bit to further, like I was able to stop my blood pressure medication with Sophia. I think I stopped 2 months ago, but I don't think it's fully settled yet. So that's still a work in progress. And
sometimes it takes months for your body to adjust to these things.
Yeah.
It's not a miracle. And in their case, some of the medication was able to be removed within 2 or 3 weeks, which is great, obviously, but not everybody can have those kind of results.
Yeah, they're younger. I was on the medication for 10 years, so it's not going to just disappear. Your body needs to flush it out. But I think the other thing that Sophia emphasized, besides being in ketosis, is also, even if it's minute, a constant weight loss where your body is constantly slightly trying to lose weight. I think part of that juggling for your body somehow also helps the purge of whatever is ailing in your body, whether you've got oxalates built up or whether you have lectins or other issues that are behind it. I think she said that even a tiny bit of weight loss, constant, helps fine-tune the ketosis and the precision work in your body. I'm not quite sure, but I think it toggles certain switches probably that keeps your body on edge and fixing things as opposed to being...
It's the hunter's edge.
Yeah.
And I think PUFAs too, like I was reading that the population these days has a much higher percentage of polyunsaturated fatty acids as the composition of their body fat. And that can take years. It's something like 18 months is the half-life for that. So I guess over time, stuff like that is also getting purged and replaced with more saturated and monounsaturated fats.
But there's some weird things that we've discovered in doing this diet. We were visiting friends that normally live in Dubai, but they were in New Jersey fixing up their little vacation home that had been ruined by a storm. And we were not staying with them, but we were visiting them. And then when we went to see them for the day, they hadn't told us, but as a surprise, they rented a boat. And so we went on this boat. We didn't have sunscreen with us. We just went as we were. We were out on this boat for 3 hours, 4 hours, full sun, reflecting from the water, plus coming straight down. None of us burned. No sunscreen. So once you eliminate all of the inflammatories, your body is so much more efficient. You're not inflamed and you don't burn.
Yeah, we don't use sunscreen anymore.
We don't need sunscreen anymore. I don't personally need deodorant anymore. I don't know, the kids, it's a little bit different. They, with teenagers, they're growing, but I don't need deodorant anymore. It's the weirdest thing. Like certain things that we used before, we don't need anymore.
So on that note, I had a question. I mean, obviously you guys have experienced, like you said, your blood pressure is a bit better. You're on lower medications. The celiac's better. The arthritis is better. What other benefits have you guys noticed from doing PKD, like just in day-to-day life? Like what are some of the benefits?
Mental alertness, energy. I think you at one point said that you felt more sane and more sympathetic towards people since going gluten-free. So you're
right
more,
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's at the time. So a sense of balance, a sense of calm,
Sense of
maturity. We're just calmer. Like this pandemic, obviously, we're so focused on what we're doing, and nothing really has changed for us. So it's very zen to be in this state, like in this mental state. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have a lot of issues, like even thinking of suicide, actually, at some point. This was mostly when I was having a lot of trouble at the high school I used to go to. But after a diet change, but also a school change, the school, I don't think it really changed how I would have thought that much, because really it was equally depressing, but it was, a bit easier to get through, I guess. But the diet, I think, is what made the difference. And I find myself, I find it extremely difficult to think of things that I used to think of, such as, what's the point of it all? Why even bother? I used to think of that sort of question a lot. But now I find it extremely difficult to think of such things.
Kind of like that was a different person, almost, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's like the palate reset. It's a complete reset of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable.
Mm.
And it allows for like a good relationship with food. I mean, that's one thing I feel like now my relationship with food is normal. My hunger and satiety are normal. Before, not so much.
Yeah, and snacking is way down too. Like before, it was almost habitual to have a meal and then have something after the meal, and mid-morning have a coffee and have something with the coffee, and at lunch have lunch, and have something after the lunch. And now the snacking is basically out.
Well, it's kind of like
we
were hobbits before. We had second breakfast and, pre-dinner and all that kind of stuff, the joke.
Or even if you sat down to watch a movie, you'd be like, oh, I must have a snack.
Or, bring out the popcorn, bring out the chips, or bring out that. And now there's a certain...
Fat bites.
Yeah.
What's that?
Now it's like bring out the fat bites.
Yeah.
Big snack.
There's a certain society, I guess, when you're
satiated,
when you feel satiated by the food you eat because it's dense, that you just don't want any more afterwards.
Yeah. The only thing we would consider as a snack for us to have is pork rinds.
Or the pancakes.
Those are like a daily dessert.
Bacon chips when we make them.
Oh yeah, we make bacon chips in the shape of Doritos. You fold them into threes and they become triangles. Crisp them up. Yummy.
Put lots
Yeah.
of.
I might have to do that as soon as we get off of this podcast.
Yeah, and I mean, and in terms of dip, I discovered this sort of carnivore mayonnaise. It's made out of like eggs. I made it with tallow and some salt, and that's all it was. And I just kind of whipped it together. I mean, it's not exactly like mayonnaise, but it tastes good. So you could use that to dip your Doritos. And if you
Well, I made deviled eggs with tallow.
Oh, okay.
It came out really good.
Okay.
Not as tangy, obviously, as with mayonnaise. But that's the thing I want to do next is like a type of mayonnaise to do it with, we're not using any oils now. That was the other thing we eliminated. So that would be good to have as a replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm curious if, especially Helma and Isabella, if you've had your thyroids checked since this diet.
No, but as I was going through all my notes over the last years that I noted things down, I noticed, for example, that when Isabella had her period before this change, it was very severe. Mm-hmm. Pain, cramping, days off from school, changing linens during the night twice over. That's never, ever happened again. So right now, the periods are, I would say, normal. Whereas before, I don't think that was normal. But some people accept it because they think that's the way things are. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, I think this may have been from the medication she used to take. She used to grind her teeth. That's gone. And Massimo, you used to be a mouth breather at night. You would not sleep and breathe through your nose. You weren't even aware of it. That's gone as well. So these are just some of these things that people just assume to be normal, and I don't think they are. But unless you know differently, you're going to keep doing it thinking that's just the way you are. But these are just some of the changes that I noticed as we've changed ourselves.
Great.
So, I mean, you guys are now recovered, mostly recovered. I mean, what are the main challenges you guys face now? Like, what next? Like, is it just kind of coasting on what you're doing, or is there anything else you're still kind of working on, hoping gets better?
One of the things that we're dealing with is we don't know whether the arthritis caused it or it caused the arthritis. Isabella has necrosis of the hip.
Okay.
So that is a concern. What we've done is, Sophia said if she's in ketosis for at least a month, that should help resolve the necrosis. We also...
It should at least take the inflammation markers down.
Exactly. So we're working on that because working from home during the school year, during the pandemic, I think the stress went up. So now we're focusing on keeping her in ketosis. Plus we started functional patterns, which are different ways of approaching movement.
Mm-hmm. Strengthening the core.
Strengthening the core.
And my trainer, he has actual proof of this working. Like, he used to have scoliosis, but then he got rid of that with just functional patterns.
So Kate, you're nodding. Amazing. Yeah, so we've started functional patterns, and Isabella right away said that in retrospect, the yoga didn't help, the swimming didn't help, but her sense is that this will help. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing once a week.
And the folks at Functional Patterns actually, I think you probably know this, but they advise strongly against yoga. It's actually quite destructive for the body. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Another thing, ever since yesterday in the afternoon, was it yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
I decided to stop using the walking with a crutch because that's what I've been doing ever since January. Actually, no, mid-December.
Mm-hmm.
I was on crutches because my necrosis deteriorated over the winter. And I stopped using the crutch ever since yesterday afternoon, and I immediately noticed ever since this morning that I was a lot less stiff and I was walking better.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Awesome. Yeah.
About the
obviously this is going to be one of those things that improves and it goes down, depending on what's happening. So we're just learning to go with the flow really and adapt. But unfortunately, a lot of what we end up doing is not necessarily condoned by the doctors. Yeah, because a lot of these things happen when we don't have an appointment. So then you need to make changes in how you approach things. And Sick Kids told us essentially, the orthopedic surgeon said she may have to have a hip replacement one day let's delay it as much as possible. In the meantime, no running, no jumping, and no weight-bearing exercise. So right now, she doesn't run, she doesn't jump, but I think some very strategic weight-bearing exercise is being done with functional training, and we're seeing some improvements, so we'll just go with it.
And I feel physically better
and
stronger.
Yeah.
I assume they don't want her to do the weight bearing jumping stuff because what happens is with hip osteonecrosis, the femoral head can actually collapse once the necrosis starts. And that is a later stage, and like you can't really reverse that once it's collapsed. But on that note, was she ever on prednisone or any kind of steroid medication for her arthritis?
Yeah, what they did once, when she was in really bad shape, they did steroid injections in her ankles and her hips under anesthesia.
Okay.
And at the time I was told, I said, how long do these last? And they said they last about 4 to 6 months. And we were always implementing dietary changes, so she never had them again. But now they're bringing it up again. But I've also heard that these steroid injections can actually lead to a femoral collapse.
I'll have to look up the injections themselves. My understanding was one of the possible causes of osteonecrosis is oral steroid medication like prednisone. So I don't know if she's ever taken it orally as well, but I'd have to look it up.
She did one run after the joint injections did not take as much as it needed to. They augmented it with the oral prednisone, I think for 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
But that was only once.
Okay.
And they're pretty certain that she already had the necrosis at that point, so that was not the cause.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look into it afterwards and let you know.
Thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. So right now, these are some of the changes that we've implemented, and even the person that's teaching the functional patterns, he did yoga and it did damage to him. Mm-hmm. So now, and the yoga we did was extra careful one-on-one. It was with someone very highly skilled in multiple, not just yoga, but multiple. She knew the body, the structure, and all of that. And she was amazing, there's no question, but it was the actual format that wasn't working for Isabella. Now the functional pattern seems very promising.
That's great.
So we'll see. This COVID is actually a blessing because you kind of have to figure things out on your own. Because otherwise you end up going to a doctor and they say, do this, do that.
I don't see it as a blessing because school was the only thing that kept me walking.
I know. No, but what I mean is in the medical sense, in that.
That is understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it wasn't good from the point of view that we were less mobile. Absolutely, it was not a good thing. So.
How to figure out new ways, right?
That's right.
Walks, whatever you can.
Yeah. We do exercise.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you what you guys are using to track ketones. Like, are you using like a finger prick or ketone strips? Finger prick. Good. Okay.
Well, we do both because the finger prick is expensive. Mm-hmm. And so for Isabella now, because Sophia said for her to be in ketosis for a month, I'm doing blood work every day because it's the golden standard. It's the most precise.
Yeah.
And Christy Storchuk, she told me that Don D'Agostino, who's kind of like the keto king, he uses, at home, he uses Keto Mojo, and what is the one we use? What's it called?
Neo.
The Neo. He uses both, but his lab uses the Neo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's actually, what we're using is pretty much, that's what they use, so.
This is blood ketones, like the finger prick? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Isabella gives me the finger every morning.
Yeah, glucose and ketones, pretty much every day, and on occasion it's just the stick. I tend to do it every 2 or 3 days. I measure my glucose levels and my ketone levels, but I measure my ketone levels with the dipstick every day.
Explain to him what the optimum range is.
Yeah, so your optimum range for ketones is above 2 micromoles, and the optimum range for glucose is less than 4.6.
Wow.
And so we try to stay within, ketones above 2, glucose less than 4.6.
That's therapeutic values.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what puts you in the medical range.
Yeah. And have you played around at all with breath ketone, like breath test monitors?
No, because we don't know how reliable they are.
Yeah, I don't think that they are super reliable. I was just curious if you had possibly calibrated between the two and seen what your...
No, I was really interested in the CGM to get a constant glucose monitor, but I think during the pandemic they sold out, and the next time they had them again, the prices were outrageous.
Really?
Yes. So we never did it, and then I've heard a few people say, I think Nutrition with Judy found it to be inconsistent. So at that point, yeah, so I thought at that point, I'm not going to waste money on it. We've got the most accurate mechanism at home, and that's the golden standard is blood anyway. So I thought, you know what? And there's value to having it on you 24 hours just to see, just for example, stress, lack of sleep, how it affects your glucose. Different foods.
Exercise, all those things.
Yeah, but at this point, I mean, we do it first thing in the morning before eating, and it's been reliable and more than adequate for PKD. So we figured that there's no need to spend more money on other things that do kind of the same thing.
I actually got a CGM a few weeks ago, and I showed Kate my graph, and at one point I was like 2.8. So she's like, "Oh, that's very concerning," but like I felt completely normal. So I mean, I kind of think that maybe there was some inaccuracy or a problem with the CGM itself, with the probe that I was using. So you're probably
and that
better
was also
off.
Was that within the first 24 hours of you putting it on as well?
No. That was happening. That was happening like well into the 2 weeks that it was on my arm. So yeah, it was strange. It was a flat line, so I didn't really care. Like, I mean, it was pretty consistent, but it was showing low quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, so I wore a CGM for like the better part of a year. And so I have definitely experienced certain sensors are faulty without a doubt. They are definitely willing to replace any sensors that are faulty though. So as long as you record a couple of those measurements that are way off, if you can, compare to a finger prick test, then they'll send you a new sensor, no problem, no questions asked. But most sensors are pretty accurate. And I mean, you might have a difference of 0.1 on a, say 5.0 versus 4.9. Usually it's within that tight range. So it's not too far off, but there can be discrepancies. And especially if you're only going to giving it a go one time, like one sensor for a 2-week period, you could have one that's slightly off and not realize it. So it is important to sort of play a bit there.
Even with them being off, I think everyone should be given one.
I agree.
To find out what's really happening in their bodies, especially now with COVID, they're discovering that a lot of these people that are having extreme reactions, these metabolic flare-ups, it's high glucose. So I think if people had a sense of what is really happening in their bodies, and low vitamin D. So if people really knew their perception of being healthy versus what is actually healthy, I think it'd be a huge eye-opener for most people.
Yeah, I was telling my dad the other day that obesity, type 2 diabetes, and I think low vitamin D levels are among the preventable risk factors. You can't obviously change your age and stuff like that, but you can prevent those risk factors. And just imagine how many deaths could have been avoided or long-term complications of COVID infection if people had gotten on top of these things, if they knew how to get on top of these things even,
Yes.
There was I follow a woman, she used to work in the White House, and she does this thing on Instagram called News, Not Noise. Her name is Jessica Salin. And she flagged a young woman that got COVID along with her husband at the same time. The young woman is 30. Her husband is, I think, 49. He's a firefighter, cigar smoker, meat eater. And she's 30 and, the standard American diet. So I asked her, sorry? No, she wasn't a vegan, but pretty much. In any case, so I asked her, I said, they both got sick at the same time. He was well within 8 days. She was struggling 3 months later. So I said, I'm curious what the difference is between the two of you, because you do live in the same household and there's a big age difference. What do you eat that's different? She said, well, he's a huge meat eater. I'm way healthier because I eat lots of vegetables and fruits. And I remember thinking, bingo. That is right. She would never recognize that. You're not objective or able to see it. But the standard approach to what is perceived health is lots of fruit and vegetables, and that's wrong.
And grains.
Sorry?
And grains.
Yes.
Grains are advocated to be an important
Meanwhile,
part
her
of
husband's a firefighter, so he's obviously already probably has compromised lungs. On top of it, a cigar smoker and a heavy meat eater. Within 8 days, he was back to normal. She's part of the long haul group of people that got COVID for over 6 weeks and is still not recovered.
And the same is true not just for COVID, but for many acute and chronic issues, like high blood sugar in a car, in a person who's in a car accident increases their risk for death. High blood sugar for a whole bunch of different viral situations and chronic conditions lower your chances of survival. So it's not just COVID, it's right across the board. So
it lowers your immune system.
Yeah, it increases inflammation and all kinds of things. So if we could just change the message just about that one thing, I think, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how much money we would save as a society, tax dollar wise, et cetera, throughout the healthcare system. If we could just dial that one thing in.
Yeah. Like you said, it compromises your immune system, diabetes, and then it's a surgical risk too, right? Like obesity, just intubating someone can be difficult. Imagine you're in a car accident, you're in a trauma, and they're trying to intubate you, but having trouble because they just can't. It's just mechanically difficult to do. And then complications after surgery are increased. So yeah, 100%, I agree.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I mean, I don't wish this on anyone, but I can't be happier that this happened to us as soon as it did. Because first of all, these three, their brains are still growing until they're 25. So we're able to give them optimum health while they're still young enough where it matters, and to future generations, because a lot of the problems that people are having genetically you're going to pass that on. A lot of these things are passed on to the next generation. We're giving them the health now, plus we're giving them the health for their offspring at some point. You know, it's life-changing.
Epigenetics, it's a real thing. It's actually, you know, the health of the mother and father at the time of conception will change how healthy the baby is, what genes are turned on.
That's right. And a lot of these things that they're finding, for example, the Roundup is actually being found in the DNA of plants. So if you're eating a lot of plants, you're essentially ending up with that in your DNA as well. And you're passing that on to your children, grandchildren. And they don't even know the long-term implications of all of that at this point.
Dan, Petra, I think you guys were about to say something a little while back in the podcast, but we may have talked over you by accident.
Okay. It's okay. So I remember when we met, Helma and family, we met, and I think you guys told us that there were certain foods still within the PKD protocol that you would eat that would kick you out of ketosis. So I'm just wondering, what were they? I feel like it was maybe salmon. Is that right?
It was chicken.
Chicken.
I remember in January last year, we had them in ketosis, and then one night we had chicken. The next thing they were out. I think chicken is like a glucose. It's
because it's a two-legged animal and it's not fed properly.
What kind of chicken was it? What was on it?
It was definitely organic chicken, and it was with the skin. I don't recall now what kind of chicken, but I think at the end of the day, first of all, chickens are not fed what they should be eating anymore. They're little vegetarians running around.
Yeah, also, chickens are carnivorous.
That's right.
They're supposed to be.
They're supposed to be. But they're not.
But they're being fed corn and what have you.
Yeah, so we no longer eat chicken. But yeah, the chicken raised the glucose.
We rarely eat chicken.
Yeah. Sophia does not condone two-legged animals.
What we may not have done, though, is respected the fat to protein ratio during those instances. And so that's something that I think we got to be more careful about, because the chicken is very, very lean meat. And unless you take the chicken and you put the fat right next to it that you're supposed to be consuming and do that, and the same goes with salmon or any type of fish, then you may not be getting enough fat to maintain the ratio for proper ketosis.
But the glucose went up too. So it was, I think chicken naturally doesn't have much fat, the way they've bred them. And that's the same is true for pork. So we had 2 lucky instances in that we were exposed to top quality meats. One, a colleague of my husband, Matthew Marion, gave us as a gift, he gave us meat from a ranch. And this was in 2017. It was, I think, a package of ground beef and a package of stewing beef. And even just the color compared to what you would buy at a grocery store was staggering, the difference. I remember thinking, wow, where do I get this? Where can I get more? And then I found a Dutch farmer in Holland who was breeding Mangalitsa pigs, because I know PKD uses a lot of Mangalitsa pork, because it's an animal that's highly fatty. It's an almost extinct breed from Hungary that is almost like a small mammoth. It's a very curly-haired pig. But then with his help, I found 2 breeders, one in Quebec, one in Alberta, and I was able to buy half a Mangalitsa from her 2 years ago. And even when I got that shipment, the color of the meat, like the pork you buy in a store, is almost like chicken. It's useless. The pork that I was sent was like a steak.
Yeah.
And then the fat.
Purple.
Yes, that's right. Almost purple with a thick layer, at least a third fat.
Yeah.
And then our friend Gabriele Paganelli, who runs Spiducci, he found out about it. He's like, get me the other half. So we ended up bringing a whole pig over from Quebec and sharing it. And but that was key. It was 1/3 fat. It was just beautiful meat. And that's where we upped our game to getting better sourced. But you know, it's not easy.
No, it's
just
not.
trying to find a reliable butcher like 6 years ago was impossible. It really was. So we've come a long way.
We've got to improve the access of the meat chain supply. You know, and you can't just walk into a supermarket and expect to find good meat. That's the reality.
Yeah, you can't.
That's true. Yeah.
It's still better than buying anything else in the store. If you're going to start somewhere, start there. Don't buy anything else in the store.
Yeah.
It's a start, and then refine as you can afford it. Because with time, like in the beginning, this was very expensive, but we actually eat very little now. Because the volume of what we eat is much smaller because it's so nutrient dense. So it seems like an unsurmountable cost. But at the end of the day, we're eating very little compared to before.
Yep. I'm eating 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of food a day. Before, it was easily over 2 or 3 pounds of food, like every day, sometimes more. So I 100% agree. And
along with that is the waste factor.
Yeah.
There's very, very little waste that goes with it.
Yeah, we throw up.
I'm talking about what goes in the garbage and what actually comes out of your body too.
Yes.
A lot of it is absorbed and used, as opposed to just making its way through and in and out it goes.
Yeah. Our green bin is bones, coffee grinds, eggshells.
Oh, so you guys still are consuming coffee?
Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of quantities.
Yeah, very less. And no sugar in it, nothing in it. I did bullet coffee like 2 years ago. No more bullet coffees.
I think even Sophia Clemens admitted to drinking coffee on a podcast. She's trying to cut down, but even she does it. So
I think it leads to leaky gut. So if you have a leaky gut, I think it can compound it. I think if you need to heal from something, you shouldn't be having it.
Just on the note, you guys are talking about not being able to get high quality meat in the store. I want our viewers who may be trying to improve their diet, I want them to understand that like just because you can't do a diet perfectly doesn't mean it's a failure. Like dietary choices are on a spectrum. So like even it's not the optimal best choice, you're still making a better choice than what you could have otherwise made. And that's a win right there. So don't be discouraged by that.
Yeah.
And with time, the cost of what you're doing, I used to spend, I don't know how much money on supplements. I don't spend that anymore. Like good quality supplements. All of that's gone. That was a huge expense. Fruit and vegetables are super expensive, especially organic. That was big money. Essentially, we're buying just good quality meat. My butcher gives me all his fat. They love us.
Yeah,
and I
once you found a butcher, I would think that the fat would be really cheap.
Yeah.
Who's buying it?
Yeah, nobody, everyone wants their fat trimmed off, and they were just tossing it before. And I noticed, for example, they get this amazing prosciutto, but it doesn't fit in their slicer unless they trim off the fat. So I noticed that they have to trim it. I said, well, what do you do with that? And they're like, well, do you want it? I'm like, uh-huh.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I think
you need a good friend, a butcher friend.
Yeah,
But
and
the
on that
grocery
note,
stores is still fine. Just whatever you do, don't buy anything from the inner aisles. Start with what you can afford. It's still better than whatever is in that aisle.
Yeah,
Agreed.
And check ingredients, because a lot of times, you know, you'll find meat is can have marinade, can have other ingredients that you don't expect.
It can easily be ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had an allergic reaction to there's a man-made salt. It's called sodium triplyl phosphate. It used to be used primarily on frozen scallops and shrimp. You could not, out of 100% of the shrimp in a grocery store, 99% of them have sodium triplyl phosphate on them. I had an anaphylactic reaction to that, and now I've been seeing it increasingly in other prepared foods. Even, for example, like souvlaki at Costco from Quebec, the chicken has sodium triplyl phosphate on it. And this is a man-made salt. Already, salt is a natural substance. Why is it that they came up with a chemical substitute? Apparently, it's for plumping the protein. So the scallop will not end up having, you know, the freezer burn, moisture loss. It's nice and plump, and they can sell it for more because it weighs in heavier. It has like a third of the volume.
Yeah.
But I also remember reading in this tiny little editorial that these two men that were cleaning out a tank of sodium triplyl phosphate, I think in Maryland or somewhere where they were processing a lot of fish, in that tank, as they were hosing it out, they both died from the fumes.
Yeah, it's also used in potatoes, right? Sometimes.
I haven't seen it in potatoes. It's mostly with frozen protein or prepared foods. Again, this is another thing that we have natural salts. Why come up with a chemical alternative? It has a nefarious purpose. It's to plump it. They can sell it for more, and it's one more thing that can make you sick.
Yeah. I mean, this might be a little bit of an extreme thing to say, but I think there's a lot of hubris and arrogance sometimes when we feel like as a race, we know what we're doing, creating foods, like these chemical abominations that we think are safe, but we don't really know long-term what happens to us when we eat these things, right? So I think that's that to me is it's dangerous. I mean, some people may argue with me about that, but I don't know. I just see it all around us, right? You guys are seeing it. People are getting sick.
But Vajid, at the moment, I think most of humanity is a walking experiment, because we're being fed stuff that nowhere resembles what our forefathers were eating.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the bigger problem is the business aspect of it, because they think, aha, we invented something that could be, you know, better than this natural thing. And then they realize they need to sell it. So the thing is, the best way to get people to buy something is to convince them that they need it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is incredibly easy to make a convincing looking article or study. Like literally all you have to do to get at least half of the internet on board with you is write "scientists say" in an article. And I bet you an overwhelming amount of people will believe that immediately.
It's manipulating.
As long as you put "scientists say" or anything like that, you will get a bunch of people reposting that article and saying, "Oh, look at this! It's healthy for you. It's great." And that's it. That's all they have to do.
Yeah.
Like literally anyone can make a convincing article on the internet now, and it's just instant business for everything.
It's unbelievably misleading.
We're the only species smart enough to make our own food, but dumb enough to eat it. I don't know who came up with that quote, but it stuck with me. Like, no other species has problems with food. They know what they need to eat, they eat it, and they live.
Yeah.
We're the only ones stupid enough to alter that balance.
Adriano raised a great point too, just about the greed, like the whole, like Isabella's wearing that t-shirt. What does it say? It's the cow, not the how, right? It's not the cow, it's the how. Yeah. And that's from that movie Sacred Cow, where their whole point is that industrial agriculture is not sustainable. we have to find an alternative. And it is really going back to our roots, like regenerative agriculture and making sure animal products are an essential part of our diet. So yeah.
Just to give you a little story, when I was still buying pasta, I was buying the best gluten-free pasta I could find, and I remember thinking, I'll get the one that's part corn because it's no good, part rice because that's no good, and part quinoa, which is a little bit better, thinking I was doing the smart thing and kind of diversifying the sources of the grain. And I remember putting away a bag, and it fell on the floor, it popped open, and I stepped down on it by accident, and the pasta wouldn't break with my full weight coming from a step onto the pasta. So I remember thinking, what the hell is this made of? This is like a hard plastic. So I said to my husband, I said, Michele, take some of this and put it in a mouse trap outside. I want to see if anything will eat this. And it wouldn't be touched. Do you remember that? That's when I was like, that's it. No animal would touch it. And I thought, here we are boiling this and eating it. It's not a food, it's plastic. It's play food.
But they make it taste so good.
I know.
The other day we went to some fancy schmancy grocery store in Midtown because we ran out of eggs. So it was kind of like a desperation. It's going to close soon. And I feel like it was more of a plant-based, vegan type of grocery store. I was so overwhelmed by the colorful packaging, and like we actually started reading everything because I guess it's been a while since we've kind of been in a grocery store, and it was like crazy to see the marketing, the intense amount of like money put into marketing to kind of get you're eating candies but has 0 sugar. It's gonna be so healthy for you. Like everywhere I looked, we were just bombarded with just, I don't know. I remember walking out and saying to Daniel, like, was that messed up or what? Like,
actually, it was more like we were impressed
of
how everything looks so amazing, colorful, delicious. Like the little taglines on every snack. It was like, oh yeah, the old us, the sucker would have like cleaned up on aisle 2.
Oh yeah, I would have grabbed
with all
everything.
those beautiful treats and the snacks, right? So it was almost like, oh wow, like looking at it from a different lens now, where it's so easy just to pick up something from here. I mean, they do all the marketing so damn well, right?
That's exactly it. I felt like for the first time, we kind of looked at it from a different lens. Like every time we go to Metro or Loblaws, we just kind of walk to get what we need. Like whether it's sparkling water or
Eggs.
Yeah, that's about it. But this store was kind of like smaller. So we were forced to look around, and it was like out of this world, honestly.
Some of those things are made with good intentions, like because they're convinced that those things are healthy. But then comes the business part is that they want money. A lot of those products are not made with good intentions, and they're just there to jump on the bandwagon and sell you things.
Yep. There's a whole science to it, like the bliss point. They try to get the right amount of sweetness, saltiness, crunchiness, texture, mouthfeel, and it's like this thing that is intended to addict you. And then they do the things like that salt they made up that adds bulk, so they can sell it for more. And then there's like the industrial seed oils are really cheap, so they throw that stuff in instead of a more expensive fat or oil into the food product. So it helps their bottom line, but that's not why we're eating food. We're eating food because we want to be healthy and nourished, right?
Yeah, I think people severely underestimate the lengths that some companies will go just to get their hands on the consumer's wallet.
It's a business.
Oh, it's all about that.
That's what a business is, right?
Especially the multinationals.
No, but the thing is, people think they don't realize that it's just being completely at the cost of their health. Like they don't realize that the company does not care at all about them, and they just want to get paid. That's it, pretty much.
They just want to make a profit.
So I want to. Sorry, go ahead.
When I was in high school, I did a project on subliminal seduction, which was something that was made illegal because in movies, what they would do is they would flash an image of something for, I don't know, 1/100 of a second. So the subconscious would be aware of that happening, but nothing else. You would just get incredibly thirsty because they just flashed a bottle of Coca-Cola with dew dropping off, and you'd be like, oh my God, I need a drink. But you wouldn't realize that you actually saw this for 1/100th of a second. And it was made illegal afterwards because it was being used in nefarious ways. And now what they're doing is so much more sophisticated, and there's no consumer protection for children or anyone that is constantly bombarded with all this material.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to ask my last question to you guys. It's for the whole family, because I know we're kind of getting close to the 2-hour mark. So this will be it for me. But like basically you guys, a lot of our viewers will be people exploring carnivore. And now this may be the first time they're hearing about PKD. Maybe they've heard about it before. They're on the fence about trying it. I just want to kind of maybe, if we go from like Adriano through all you guys ending with Helma, like, what do you guys have to say to people like that, like our viewers that may be exploring carnivore and possibly PKD? What message do you want to leave them with?
Ask questions. Ask a lot of them, and ask them to various people. Don't try to just stick with what you know, because chances are you don't know everything that you need to know, and you don't, I mean, chances are you're sticking to something that you think might work, but it might not be the best for you specifically. So just ask questions, try whatever makes you feel best, and don't push yourself to make any drastic changes on the spot. Like, do things gradually, take your time, and ask a lot of questions along the way.
Yeah. I would say to whatever, I would essentially say the same thing to any of my friends who actually inquire about the diet, because I've had a few friends that actually come up to be like, hey, I want to try out the carnivore diet because clearly it's very successful for you and your family. And a few of them have actually, come and interviewed my mom. But as I would tell anyone, is like, unless you have unless you're willing to change your lifestyle dramatically, or you have a pre-existing health condition where clearly some things are not working out for you, you want to try something completely novel to fix it, then definitely try to do your own research, right? And start off by incorporating more meat into your diet, right? Okay, I want my dinner to be at least 50% meat, right? Instead of having it based on vegetables or based on like beans or any other kind of thing, and slowly make yourself into it. Because I mean, for at least people my age, it's not easy. A lot of people go out, want to go eat at restaurants, go eat fast food because whatever's convenient, whatever's most socially acceptable to do. But you're gonna have to start cooking a lot by yourself on your own, and that is a definite thing that you're gonna have to do if you want to do on this diet. But start progressively, and there are definite symptoms at the beginning when you go straight onto carnivore diet. You're probably not going to feel so good for the first maybe 3 days to a week. But afterwards, if you were to continue through that, you'll really see the results compared to feeling before.
Okay. I'd say that for people who are, oh my goodness.
Take your time.
If you're not sure on which diet will help you the most, on whether to go PKD, vegetarian, vegan, I'd say that you need to see if what happens when people do those diets, and search for proof if they're successful or not. Like, so far, I've seen no proof that the vegan or the vegetarian diets actually help us. But with my own experiences, I know that PKD will help me physically and mentally, and I'm sure it can help everyone else.
Well, I would suggest, and I wouldn't recommend people to look up success rates. I would just suggest to them to try different things for themselves, because literally the internet is not reliable. at all.
Yeah, and I mean, going from the standard American diet to any other whole foods based diet, whether it's vegan or otherwise, you're going to feel better, right? So that kind of skews things a little bit as far as the anecdotes go.
Right, it all depends what you were eating before. If you were eating complete junk and you go vegan or vegetarian, it might be an improvement.
It is an improvement because you've eliminated processed food. The way I would say people to do it is to stagger the change. And I would say eliminate one of two things. I would say, well, the seed oils is big, but also eliminate, let's say, I'm going to stop eating grains or I'm going to stop eating dairy. Those are two massive inflammatories right there. And just target one and get it down to 100%. Make that perfect. And then, because that's what we did, grains, dairy. And then with time, you use crutches in the beginning and then you're like, okay, enough, and you're done.
Actually, we eliminated dairy first.
No, we did grains. Oh, you're right. Gluten-free, dairy, grains. Yeah.
Sugars.
Yeah.
So on, so on.
Because, I mean, for example, I had bleeding gums and the dentist were like, they didn't know what caused it. I had really bad tinnitus. Like sometimes it was like a tea kettle. Sometimes it was like popping rocks. Or, you know, when someone opens the windows in the car and they're like, you get this fluctuation. And I would get that in the middle of a doctor's appointment and with no reason. So all of these things are gone. These are all small indications that something is seriously wrong. And I think there's not Dr. Pran, but another one who's a dentist who says that bleeding gums are a clear sign that you've got a metabolic disorder. Denver? No. An alternative dentist. I can't remember his name.
Dentist. I think I know who you're talking about. Yes. Yeah.
So there are people out there, and the thing is, if you have anything wrong with you at all, even the smallest things that you used to think that you were just getting old, that your wrists were hurting, that you had repetitive, what is that called? The repetitive.
Carpal tunnel.
He thought he had carpal tunnel. The minute we eliminated gluten, it went away.
Yeah, it was inflammation of the joints.
It was inflammation.
I got something similar.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't have it anymore, right?
No.
Okay. And they're heavy computer users, and it's gone.
Well, could I say one more thing before
yes,
we
of
wrap
course.
up?
Yeah.
Another thing for viewers is you don't have to skip out on taste. Just use use your favorite salts. Just try different things. Try herbs. Try lots of different salts. I think salts make a huge difference if you find a good one that you like. Mm-hmm. And if you want to try organ meats, I personally really think ground, well-cooked liver mixed with your favorite salt is so much better to ease into compared to like raw or less cooked, like a chunk of liver. Ground mixed with salt is
and cooked in lots of fat.
So much better.
Yeah.
And based in fat.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say to figure out what tastes best to you, because I know taste is also a big limitation specifically for organ meats, because most people don't grow up with eating them these days. I didn't. I hated liver, but I honestly really don't mind it now, especially now that I've had it for a while. But I also think that the way we have it is a huge difference. Ground with my favorite salt.
Yeah, I asked my butcher to grind it now. So he grinds it for me, and then I cook it in bacon fat, and then they salt it, and it almost tastes like ground beef sometimes.
Yeah. And also sweetbreads are pretty neutral tasting. They're somewhat similar to chicken. I think they're pretty easy to
incorporate.
Yeah, to have a little piece every now and then.
They're like a dark chicken almost, like chicken thighs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, butchers can do an organ grind too. They'll mix up a bunch of organs. It actually tastes more like ground beef to me than anything.
That's right.
Michael, did you have a message for our viewers? Anything you want to leave them with?
No, PKD itself is actually not easy because you are giving up a lot. And frankly, if you have a condition, however, I highly recommend it. If you're trying to overcome any kind of chronic condition or any kind of autoimmune, I think it's the way to go, as opposed to seeking standard pharmaceutical-based medication. I think it's a natural way to try to overcome whatever illness you might have, and it's definitely worth a try. It's definitely worth a try.
It also help with your mental health. I mean, not only did the PKD help my body with my arthritis, it also helped my mental state. It actually helped me do better in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful.
Like the measurements, the improvements are tangible across the board, not just how you feel physically, mentally, but how you then do at school, do everything that you do.
So carnivore is a good first step. There's a good
Practice.
Way in.
Yeah.
PKD is a whole different level.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to do PKD for optimal health, but it does require sacrifices. And however, it is something to really consider if you want better health, and if you are trying to overcome chronic conditions and
get off medications.
Yeah, and especially if you're taking medication. And we know certain diseases are proven to be reversible on this type of diet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you guys so much for spending this time with us and sharing all of your unique stories. It's so refreshing to see a family doing this together and for kids to get this amazing leg up in life. I wish that we would see more of that out there. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our little crew here. Alicia, we missed you today. And our next episode, we are really excited to have Dr. Pran Yoganathan. I'm probably butchering your last name. We will make sure we clarify that on our actual episode with you. Dr. Pran is a gastroenterologist, and we're going to be talking all about gut health through the lens of animal-based nutrition. So definitely don't miss that one. We will see you guys next time.
Just one quick thing. The success of what we were able to do had hinged on the fact that we all did it together.
Yeah.
For
right?
Sure.
If you have a family split, it's more difficult.
Stronger in a group.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big obstacle to people when they don't have everyone in the family buying in. It can be really tough. So that's awesome that you guys were able to pull it together, all of you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for hosting us.
See you guys around.
Thank you. Definitely.
Take care.
Thank
Take
you
care.
guys.
Have a good day.
Have a nice
Bye.
day.
Right.
Ciao.